There's a difference between exuding strength and you just somebody that's loud making a lot of noise, right? There's also a difference between masculinity and emotional aggression. And there's also a stark difference between leadership and performance. So obviously, right now I'm talking about what happened between Corey Holcomb and Anton Daniels. And my opinion, this was more than just an argument. I'm observing this and I'm looking at it as a cultural autopsy. That entire exchange, even if you haven't seen it, I'll link it down in the description box below. But it wasn't just like some internet beef. I'm saying that it exposed two competing visions of what it means to be a man, right? And only one of these competing visions, only one of them produces freedom and respect. So, I'm going to break all of this down and we're just going to get into this. Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. I'm your host, April Chapman, and welcome to today's show. So, before I say anything and get into this commentary on the debacle that happened between Anton Daniels and Corey Holcomb, I want to be fair and I want to be transparent. Now, right around, it's been almost a year. I interviewed Anton Daniels. It was actually last February. I was up in Detroit for an event with Blexic, and I reached out to Anton beforehand, digitally conversed with his lovely wife, Miss Rita. And we arranged everything. And y'all, Anton gave me a great interview. He was kind and gracious and incredibly generous with his time. I was up there with the rest of the dream team, and Anton was incredibly open and just real. He shared some practical insight into entrepreneurship, and we talked about content creation and YouTube growth, and it was just a really good time. Now, with that said, do I agree with everything that Anton Daniels does or says? Well, of course not. Okay, only an unwise idiot would believe that just because I interview a person that somehow means that I agree with everything that they do and say. But here's what I do respect about Anton Daniels. Anton spends a great deal of time. If you watch his content, he's trying to help Black Americans see that this ghetto culture and the victimhood and all of the dysfunction that you see, he's trying to highlight how it is toxic and it is not going to give us favorable outcomes. For me, that matters. Okay. I can categorically look at his body of work, whether I agree with everything he says, and highlight that the things that he talks about as it relates to his cultural commentary has a lot of merit. And to me, that matters. And I've also covered Corey Holcomb in the past, not in the same way, but I have agreed with Corey Holcomb when it came down to how he criticized false teacher Jamal Bryant. And Corey was spot on and he was absolutely right on that issue. So, with that being said, being right once doesn't make you wise, and telling the truth selectively doesn't make you a leader. So let's actually talk about what happened when Corey invited Anton Daniels onto the 5150 podcast. Now, I don't watch 5150. Sometimes I'll see the clips, and, if Corey says something that's kind of related to my wheelhouse, I'd be like, yeah, that's great. And I do watch Anton more than I watch him. But during the conversation between Corey and Anton, it got very heated. Now, we are not going to show any of the footage from that. So if you came here expecting me to do a play-by-play, I'm not going to do that. You can watch it, and more than enough people have reacted to it. I'm giving a broad overview and my thoughts and opinions of that conversation. But Corey, in my opinion, was disrespectful and crude, and he asserted that Anton was or spent time pandering to white people and kissing white people's behinds. Of course, he didn't use the word behind, he used an expletive. And he claimed that Anton spent most of his time building a platform by criticizing Black culture. And he asserted that Anton was doing so for white approval. Now, anybody who watches Anton's platform should know that that accusation is just simply not true, right? Anton does criticize Black culture, and he is incredibly harsh on Black women, and rightfully so. But I do the same thing too. And we do so because we believe that the things that we are seeing coming from the Black community are not good. Okay. It's actually bad. And if there's some expectation that white people can levy this criticism toward Black people and that's going to be well received, well, then that's just stupid. So because we are Black, I'm a Black American female, Anton's a Black American male, when we see the culture going in a way that it should not go, and if we believe that we have insight and wisdom to share that's going to help us, even if said criticism may hurt your feelings, we're doing it from a place of love, and it is should be considered a source of correction. Now, there is levels to this, of course. And we could even make an argument that, yes, some people are building their platform by being hypercritical of one particular people group. Well, the pro wokety woke blackety blacks do it by being hypercritical and all things against all things white, right? And Black people, that argument can be made that a lot of us are out here doing the inverse. That's fine. To me, it's an invalid argument, and it doesn't deal with the merits of what we're saying, but fine, we'll give you that. But here's what I noticed. I noticed that Corey's problem is that he is the one who actually thinks that white people inherently think or care about him and other Blacks. And that's simply not true. They just don't. White people, like Anton said, are not checking for Black people like that. Whereas Anton, from what I've learned about him, Anton does business with all kinds of people. Anton has figured out a way to navigate in this world and connect with people who add value to his life, and he connects with people that he can add value to their lives. And regardless of what color they are, he does not care. It's because he understands the way the world works. There's a level of comfort and understanding about the world that Anton has that I don't see that Corey has that same understanding, right? It's almost as if he naively espouses a victim narrative, and it's because he really doesn't understand the way that the world works. So Corey levels the sharp criticism against Anton, and then Anton responded with the same level of energy. He responded crudely, and he accused Corey of pandering and providing oral pleasantries on Black people, which is akin to basically saying, you say I kiss white people's butts, well, you out here sucking on Black people's, appendage. Emphasis on the appendage. Okay, you figure out what he's saying. Okay, I'm not going to say those words. So that type of exchange amongst men is like a low level threat of violence. Okay, and so essentially, though, what Anton was getting at is that you, Corey, and Corey's commentary co-signs dysfunction and feeds into the chaos for applause. Whereas Anton is like, I don't do that. I love Black people and live around Black people in the midst of Black people because I'm trying to hold them accountable with the truth. And so the conversation after at this point just kind of collapsed. And here's what I think people are missing. We could focus on the language. We could. An argument can be made. Yes, it was incredibly. I think Anton was lowering himself by stooping down to Corey's level. But people like Corey, that's the only language that they understand. They understand the gutter. And here's something that I wish Black conservatives would stop doing. I really wish that they would just stop wallowing down in the gutter with these degenerate types who are unable to engage in good faith in an intelligent dialogue, because these conversations never tend to end well. Because a lot of times, if you are still Black and you are male and you still overwhelmingly identify with progressivism and leftism, I am inclined to believe that you are either gay or you lean more to the effeminate side of the spectrum, and you're going to argue like a woman, and all we're going to get from you is effeminate energy, right? That's because, by and large, overwhelmingly, Black culture is steeped in feminine energy. It's matriarchal squalor on steroids. This is why the Black community you see so much dysfunction from us, because women have been at the helm. There's been a lack of self-control. Everybody's wilding out, doing what they want to do. And there's no sense of respect or honor amongst men anymore, because women don't have that type of honor or respect or decorum amongst themselves. So Black ghetto culture is overwhelmingly feminized matriarchal squalor. So the first point I want to make is these types of discussions oftentimes don't end well, and they're not helpful, because a lot of times there's a lack of intellectual capacity on the left to engage in good faith arguments. Now, y'all might be offended by that, but it's the truth. It is the truth. You're going to get a lot of emotionalism, and they're not going to deal with the merit of what you're saying. They want to rage bait you into an argument because it's the only language they know. But at the same token, these liberals, a lot of times they mess around and find out, because they assume that many of us Black conservatives out here either can't hold our own, or that you can just roll up on us and take our lunch money. And I'm a new school type of conservative, and you're not going to get that with me. I will let you crash out, embarrass yourself, and humiliate yourself. But what I'm not going to do is wallow down in the gutter and down to the pit with you and stoop down to your level. My goal is to elevate our cultural ethnic image and bring you up. I'm not stooping down to where you are. I already experienced that in a Twitter exchange with an EBT Republican, i.e. Angela Stanton King, and she wanted to waddle in the mud like this is a prison yard fight. And I'm not coming down there with you. I'm up here. If you want to rise up to where I am, let's do that. But I'm not stooping down to the hood rat gutter with you because that's the only language that you know. I don't do that. Okay? I'm trying to call our people to a better standard. Okay? And if you think that's me saying, oh, you think you're better than them, then your conclusion would be accurate. Yes. You should think that. I don't want to be down here with the matriarchal miscreants and the pavement ape aspect of our culture. We used to be the beautiful people. We used to be ones that walked with our head up high and our shoulders back. And we were the envy of our white counterparts because they saw something to be admired, and we garnered their respect. We didn't need to grovel and beg and whine or complain. We just moved through the world doing what we do and doing it with excellence. So I at least wanted to mention that. But here's the real accusation. At the core of this discussion, this was the same argument that Black America has been having for decades. You have Corey's position, which is, whether he realizes it or not, is that if you critique Black culture, you're somehow helping white people and that you hate yourself. And that if you hold Black people accountable, that is the ultimate betrayal. Well, I reject that. But the reason why they do it is because in their worldview, the enemy, he must always be external. He must be out there. He can never be the person in the mirror with the poor outcomes and the bad decision making, right? It's got to be the white man. But the reason why it's got to be the white man, it's because the reason why you always hear leftists always talking about white supremacy and white people and how come you don't never say nothing about them is because they take the subordinate position. It's their default. They don't believe that they are on equal footing with white people because it comes from an inherent, deeply held presupposition that they have an inferiority complex. And the inferiority complex comes out by being hyper obsessed and hypersensitized to anything that white people are doing, so much so that they can't even focus on what they're doing and course correct and fix the things that are deficient in themselves. They're the ones with the inferiority complex and the inferiority mindset. That's where the victimhood mentality comes from. Now, Anton's position, it's the opposite. Anton is like, listen, if we don't tell the truth, we're never going to be free. Anton uses his platform to teach Black people that, listen, victimhood is a trap. And responsibility is the price that you have to pay for real liberation. So you've got these two worldviews at odds with one another. One man wants Black people to feel justified in their foolery, and the other one wants Black people to truly be free, to function in their freedom, and to take advantage of all that this country offers them. The two goals between these two men are not the same. They are opposing worldviews, and so because of that, there's going to be friction. Now, here's why I believe that Corey reacted the way that he did. If we're just going to be honest, Corey was not threatened by Anton's insults. Corey was threatened by Anton's independence. Like I just told you, Anton functions in his freedom. He's a self-made man. He's not owned by a network. He's not controlled by sponsors. He doesn't have to tap dance to Black liberals or white conservatives. He just is, right? He has value to the marketplace. He has diversified his economic strategy, and the marketplace rewards him accordingly, right? He's been successful in real estate. He's been successful in the IT world, and now he's successful in the digital content creation space. He hasn't had to change who he is, even though I do personally, I would love for him to clean up his language. I'd love for him to elevate his sense of style and get away from all the, urban hip hop look and fully walk into his manliness. I'd like that for him, but that's not my husband, and he got a wife, right? But Corey, on the other hand, what I've observed from Corey is that he depends on an audience that would turn on him the moment he actually tried to hold him accountable. So he's trapped, right? He is trapped by the fact that he can't really speak authentically and honestly to his audience about the deficiencies in their worldview, the poor outcomes, and their behavior that rewards them for dysfunction. That is the difference between these two men. You've got a man who needs the applause and cannot tell the truth. And then you've got a man who actually tells the truth, and he does it because he doesn't need the applause. Do you see the difference? And so from my vantage point, when I looked at how that argument erupted, I saw jealousy and I saw a whole lot of ego. And let me explain to you why that matters. Jealousy isn't always loud and doesn't require a person to just come out and say, I'm jealous. sometimes jealousy or hateration or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it disguises itself as jokes, or it stands or hides behind mockery. When you're a comedian, sometimes that jealousy will wear the mask of, oh, I'm just playing. But Corey tried to humiliate Anton. And when Anton refused to submit and he hit Corey back with the same kind of derogatory energy, you saw what ended up happening. Corey got into his feelings, became incredibly reactionary and emotional, and it erupted into a spectacle and a debacle that is just embarrassing for all involved. When Anton said that basically Corey kisses black, well, he didn't know. Anton said that Corey sucks, black people's thingy, right? He was referring to the fact that Corey absolutely does pander to his audience, right? And he does it for their approval. When Anton said that, that struck a nerve with Corey. And, from a secular humanistic worldview, in my mind, I was like, well, either you took this real personal because you've done it before and it made you feel some sort of kind of way, or because there's some truth there, right? Like when you're, I'm just saying, right? When you're entire, listen, these black men being on the low and experimenting and stuff and being in Hollywood, you don't know who's doing what. I'm not saying that that is true, but it is weird that a man would take so much personal offense, even though I understand those are fighting words amongst men. I just think that there was a better way to handle that. But anyway, listen, Corey as a Hollywood comedian, I think there was some truth there, and why he took it so personal is because when your livelihood depends on never challenging your audience, you're not a leader. You're just a performer, and you're the one that's getting paid to tap dance. But Anton is a little different in that Anton says what he wants to say, and whether his audience agrees with him or not, like he always says, I'm an equal opportunity offender. My goal is not to make you feel good. My goal is to hold you accountable, and to do that, you actually have to tell your people the truth. See, it's easy to do what Corey does. It is way more risk involved. You have to have a higher risk tolerance to make the kind of content that Anton makes. That's just the truth. But here's something that we need to talk about. When it comes to manhood, I have said this in previous videos, masculinity is asserted, right? It's not shouted out really loud and you don't have to walk into a room and tell everybody you a man, right? Masculinity is asserted through discipline, right? It's not demanded in how you're able to dominate the room, but masculinity doesn't erupt. It's tempered and measured control. It doesn't seek to humiliate, but what it does do, it models the appropriate way to behave. The effeminate posture that Corey displayed, on the other hand, is the emotional lashing, the obsession with white people, and the external projection of why aren't you talking about what they do over there? That whataboutism, right? It's the effeminate energy is the refusal to examine the internal failures of the people group that you claim to love so much. That is exactly what matriarchal culture produces, right? When the way that Corey behaved is the unintended consequences and outcomes of looking and watching 3 generations of bastards raising bastards. No order, no self-control. They have no vision. They're just noise. They're just out on the internet making a lot of noise with opinions about things that don't really matter and lack substance, but you get an audience because it's the shallow and the silly. No shade, okay? Now, because this platform is Christian, I do have to bring in a biblical worldview to kind of round all of this stuff out. I love talking about these cultural issues. But it's of no value to my audience if I don't bring the word of God to bear. So I'd like to talk a moment about self-control. The scriptures give us some wisdom here in terms of how we can parse this out. I want to read from Proverbs 16:32, and it states that whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. I'm sorry. And he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. So basically, in essence, Corey lost control of the room. Anton, in my opinion, was attempting to keep his composure, but he also did match Corey's energy. The goal in situations like this is to master yourself, because you can't control what the other person does. But if you maintain your composure, that is not weakness, that's mastery. And so every person, unlike what Corey did, should be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Why? Because the anger of a man, it does not produce the righteousness of God. So Corey getting hyper emotional and all of the cussing and calling the young lady out of her name, all of that anger feels powerful. But dear ones, it doesn't really produce anything, right? No culture has ever been rebuilt by men who cannot rule their own spirit and who show out like an orangutan, right? The orangutan is the female imbecile who cannot manage her misery. This is why they show out. And so when our men start acting like that, that lets you know we are really in trouble, and this is why we're at the bottom. Now let's address, there's an aspect of this discussion that no one really wants to say out loud, but it's this plantation mindset. Some people, they just don't want freedom. They don't. They prefer what's familiar to them. Even if that familiarity comes with a lot of chains and bondage, they don't want to be free. I'm reminded the children of Israel who in the book of Exodus, where they were like, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. Right? They actually said that after Moses had freed them, they were trying to go back to the yoke of bondage because things got a little rough and things got a little hard. Understand that to function in your freedom requires competence, a whole lot of accountability, and there is always risk involved. But victimhood doesn't cost you anything. It requires nothing. This is why you have so many Black people who continue to vote for their own captivity. That's why they defend all of the dependency. This is why they actually demand more government overreach. They will attack, like we saw Corey do, anyone who dares to escape, because they're trying to figure out, where did you muster up the strength to run and function in your freedom? And because they covet such freedom, they don't know what to do with it, so they lash out at you. So here's my message to conservatives. This is where you have got to stop thinking that you can save all of these people. You can't. Some of these people want to be on the plantation. And for them, it must be okay because they're not trying to do anything to get off of it. All you can do is present the truth. You can open up the door, but you can't force these people to walk through. You can't make them leave the plantation that they love. I mean, think about it. Being a liberal is easy, but running off the plantation out into the world, into the unknown, to figure out your own way in a world that is hard, most people are unwilling to pay that price. Everybody is just not built for that. So this was my assessment of the whole Corey Holcomb and Anton Daniels kerfuffle. in my opinion, real masculinity is not all of that yelling and the name calling. It's really a mastery. When you can master yourself, and I'm not saying there's not a place for mocking, because it is. But freedom isn't easy, but it is absolutely worth it. What Anton needs to learn and walk away from this is that you cannot free people who prefer captivity. All you can do is walk in the truth, leave that door open, and if they choose to walk through it, then you'll be there on the other side talking about, we thought you was never gonna come. But it's an inferiority complex. And the lowest measure of what a person thinks about themselves when they are constantly obsessed with what someone else thinks about them. And that was the one thing I noticed when Corey asked him, why you don't never say nothing about white people. I'm sitting there like, for what? Now, we have heard Anton criticize the white liberal female, but what contention do you want us to have with white men, as opposed to saying, why isn't your contention with the black man who refused to stand up for himself and chose to be a coward and who allowed himself to be subjugated? See the difference in that? You can focus on what white people were doing, and at the same time, you can be like, but what about you? When are you going to learn to govern yourself accordingly and stop focusing your attention outward? Do some introspection for a change. And you will find that your problem all along ain't even the white man, because he ain't checking for you. Okay? He's really not. He actually wishes you would keep his name out of your mouth, but you can't. Because personal accountability is too much like right. And for some people, it's too hard. But I'm curious to know. I know y'all wanted me to show the clips. That was just way too much editing. And I was not interested in doing all of that editing to bleep out all of the expletives that proliferated that video. It was just too much for me. But I am curious to know, what do you guys think? Did you think that the outburst or the exchange that happened between them, do you think they should have even had such a brokered conversation at all? Should Anton had just stayed on his side of the YouTube streets and made the great content that he makes and wakes up the people that he wakes up, and leave Corey over there in the YouTube hood? Or do you believe that the conversation could have been had if we were dealing with two men who wanted to actually operate in good faith and exhibit some self-control? But since that didn't happen, you got the usual niggardly results. And it's out for the whole world to see. Whatever it is that you think, leave me a comment down in the description box below. And until next time, you guys, stand firm, stay bold, and above all else, stay unshakable. Grace and peace.